Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We are on episode 44. This is all about boundaries, and we call this one Where I End and You Begin. But before we get into it, I want to say hello to my partner in crime, Jamie. How are things going for you?
Good, Paige. Oh, this is a great topic. I'm glad we're doing this topic.
I know.
This is something I could talk about this topic for days, as all the things that I'm learning and applying in my own recovery. So I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah. Don't panic. We're not going to keep you here for days,
Yeah,
but
I promise.
we're going to condense days down into about 5 minutes or so. So normally I would start out tying in why we are talking about boundaries and how does it tie into food addiction recovery. But instead, I would like to actually start out by telling you a story instead of why boundaries are so vital in recovery. Several years ago, we had a dog. Her name was Riley. She was a mutt, but she was our mutt. Our daughter, Courtney, who's in her late 30s now, she was in high school then. She's like, I want a dog so bad. And I had never had a dog. We didn't have indoor dogs growing up. My dad was a hunter, so we had hunting dogs that always stayed outside. But she had all these promises that I will take care of everything. I'm going to pay for her. I'm going to clean up the poop. I'm going to make sure she's fed. And guess how many days that lasted? Jamie, do you want to take a guess?
2 to 3.
Yes, that's right. I think by day 3, 4, the shine came off the new.
Yeah.
And guess what? I had a dog for the first time in my life. So she actually literally became my baby for the next 14 and 3/4 years. She literally was my baby. We did everything together. We ran together. We slept together. I mean, she was my little mini me. We were attached at the hip, and really my husband too. She was very close to my husband too. And so, like any loving parent, I wanted to give her the very best life. My husband and I used to joke when, if we were out of the country or just on vacation, we'd say, like, if something happened to any of our 5 kids, just wait till we're back because we don't want to be, traumatized coming home. But if anything happens to the dog, call us right away and we'll be on the next. So and everybody
Get it.
knew it was a semi joke, but we loved her. I've painted the picture that we loved her so much so I tore a hole in the side of my house for this doggy door so she could have this nice comfy in and out egress entrance, so anytime she had a need she could just be independent like that.
Mhm.
So she could go sunbathe on the back deck at her leisure whenever she wanted to. But and at the same time, I had this trench dug clear around our house, around the perimeter of our house, buried this electrical fence so she could run and play with autonomy. I also bought this expensive, for those of you that have these doggy doors, these
Oh yeah.
outdoor invisibles fences, the collars are just as much as the fence
Uh-huh.
practically. So they're battery operated so that whenever she gets too close to the edge, they'll beep. And if she gets too close, there's a shock. I mean, it's not anything
Yeah.
dramatic, and you can have it turned down very low, but it's a training to remind her that she's nearing danger. So as the years passed on, I had never had a dog before, so I didn't understand that they get old and frail and sometimes things can happen. And I also didn't understand when I took this dog on how short of a lifespan they have. And she, as a mutt, she lived, like I said, 14 and 3/4
A
of a
long
year,
time.
which is a long time. So I actually got very lucky with her. But as she grew those last few months, that last year or so, I could see that she started getting a little senile coming in from the back deck. Those back hind quarters would get a little stuck in the doggy door coming in. And sometimes she was half in the house, half out of the house, and it was a little struggle. It was kind of comical, but sad to see this is only going to be going one way. So, as luck would have it, there was one day that came where that battery died in her collar without me realizing it. Riley got out of the invisible fence and found herself on this busy highway a few miles from our house, going the wrong direction in the middle of morning rush hour traffic.
Oh my gosh.
Thankfully, someone picked her up and was able to call us from her dog tag. She had an identification on her tag. So she ended up needing to be rescued when she crossed outside her safety zone, as well as protecting other drivers from being part of what could have been really a terrible tragedy. That could have been caused a horrendous wreck, and I would have felt horrible if that incident had caused an accident. But the boundaries I had set up were to keep both her safe, us safe, and other drivers outside our boundaries safe as well. All of that is to say that what some might have seen as a way for her to be held captive was actually a way for us to keep her safe. No one wants to end up trotting down the freeway with cars coming at you at 80 miles an hour at 8 a.m. So
Exactly.
that's my entrance into our discussion about boundaries.
Yes, yes. So, contrary to popular myth, boundaries are not a wall we put up to keep others away. Boundaries are physical, mental, and emotional limits we put in place to protect us as well as others we're in relationship with. So that's a different way of thinking. A lot of times people will say, put up a boundary, right? I'm going to keep them out. I'm going to say, they can't have access to me. That's not really a boundary. That's a wall.
Mm-hmm.
Boundaries are a way that we show value, that we value ourselves and protect ourselves from ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
not from others, from ourselves at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
This in turn keeps us safe from overextending ourselves at best, right? Or being manipulated or taken advantage of at worst.
Yeah.
Essentially, honoring our own boundaries helps us teach others how to treat us.
Yeah.
When these lines are respected, true recovery begins and flourishes.
Man, I just cannot agree with everything you said so much. Healthy boundaries are taught and learned in childhood and continue to be honed and revised throughout our lives. Jamie, when you were growing up, did you have boundaries? Were those taught in your home? Were they encouraged? Were they, part of your growing up experience?
Boundarylessness was part of my growing up experience. I had a lot of rules, but boundaries were not taught or modeled for me by my primary caregivers or the people I interacted with most days. There were many examples of codependence, which is a lack of boundaries in my family. Lots of doing things for others who could do them for themselves, or overstepping or overdoing or overextending, and then getting resentful and having all kinds of drama. It was an unhealthy example that lacked boundaries, and this caused conflict, right, on a regular basis. These
Mhm,
conflicts or drama were so prevalent in my life growing up that I began to look for those same dramatic and dysfunctional dynamics in my adult relationships.
mhm,
So, and when they weren't there, I created them.
mhm,
And as I began recovery and grew from years of therapy and self-development work, boundaries rose to the top of the list of skills I needed to learn. I used to think boundaries were a way of keeping myself safe from others, but it's actually the other way around. It's about keeping me safe from me, my choices, my words, my actions, my emotions. Once I do, I'm able to keep myself free of situations that used to cause drama for me, like overextending myself, avoiding conflict, people pleasing, etc. How about you, Paige?
Yeah, I I just was thinking as you were talking about that, about they're almost non-negotiables that we put in place to keep ourselves safe, but everything you said I thought was so interesting. So for me growing up, we did have house rules. Everybody was supposed to be nice. The emphasis was just on be nice. My mom would always say, "You catch more flies with honey than vinegar," or she
Mhm.
would start singing at the top of her lungs this church hymn that there is beauty all around when there's love at home. But not a lot of talk about how do we implement that. She just said to be nice. I mean, nobody knew. Okay, I just hear the word, but
Right,
nobody's telling me what that means or what that looks like or what I'm supposed to do. But there wasn't a lot of talk around boundaries during my generation, and I doubt it was ever discussed
right,
during my parents' childhood out on the farm. I mean, you're just trying to figure out what are we going to eat and how are we going to buy shoes.
right,
So so there's not a big emphasis on emotions or feelings, and I'm sure I carried that to my children too. I just wasn't aware of it at the time when I raised my kids. I don't remember it, my girlfriends and I talking about it much. I don't know if it was more generational,
mhm,
but I do see my children doing better jobs at talking about these types of things to their children and what is allowed with other people, with them and their bodies and things like that.
yeah,
So I do see that discussion happening.
yes,
It really wasn't until my late 50s that I even understood that boundaries were okay, even if it meant cutting off ties with family members that you don't feel safe around. That's okay too. So I'm a late bloomer when it comes to boundaries, but I'm so grateful that I have it's never too late, right? Is the message there. I'm grateful that this has become more a part of my life, and quite frankly, I'm happier because of it.
Yeah. And boundaries are essential when it comes to reaching goals, especially with addiction. And today
Mhm.
we're focusing especially on food addiction, but it really applies to recovery in general. And I agree, as I've, been in recovery, learning boundaries and learning how to protect myself from myself, is a very, very useful skill. But there's lots of benefits of boundaries. The first, can really be around saying no. This can be hard, especially early in recovery. And what we have there is a fear of altering relationships and still wanting to be accepted. So there's
Mhm.
that, people pleasing aspect of it. But learning how to say no means you're recognizing your self-worth and valuing your needs and wants. I learned years ago saying no allows me to protect my yes.
Yeah, I love that so much. Have you heard that saying that no is a complete sentence?
Yes,
I like that so much
another
when I
good one.
so another one is resisting temptation in early recovery can be a struggle. People, places, things can be triggers. Making sure you are honest with yourself about who you can and can't hang around and where you can and can't go in the beginning will make temptation easier to resist. I really focused on switching my social interactions from going out to lunch to talking with a walk with friends. Now, did I lose a few friends? Yeah. But you really find out who is interested in you versus who just
Exactly.
wants to go and get high at a lunch place. So, quick realization there. And for family gatherings, I had to draw strong boundaries around sugar and had to make sure that my family knew. But what happens in the beginning? This point is about what happens in the beginning, and that can change as we grow and progress.
Exactly.
I remember when I was starting early in my recovery, and my daughter and her family, I think, were coming in from out of town, which would have meant a lot of meals and things like
Mhm.
that out of my comfort zone. And I was talking to someone who had been in recovery a long time, and the trip ended up canceling. So my daughter and her family didn't come, and I had a sense of relief about it. But I'm like, why would I feel that way? I feel so guilty about this. And this wonderful, wise woman that I was talking to, she said, "You're early in recovery. It's okay. When you're like Bambi on ice, you do have to do a few things differently in the beginning. And that means protecting yourself. It won't always be that way." And, now I'm
Exactly.
2.5 years in. It's my panic over being thrown off my schedule and having people, it's much, much different. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it
That's
changed.
huge.
It's better.
That's huge. In the beginning of recovery, we may experience a roller coaster of emotions. And to your point earlier, and may not know how to express them with honest, meaningful communication. Definitely was my experience for sure. Establishing boundaries will help you recognize what you want and need and aid you in your interactions with others. This will
Mhm.
help tremendously in improving communication. But self-awareness, right? We have to figure out who we are, what we want, what we don't
Right.
want first, in order before we're ever expressing anything. So that's really the first part is know yourself and then figure out what you're how you're sharing what you're sharing with another person.
That's right, and I wanna, tap onto something about that we had someone mention the other day in our recovery group about when you're early in recovery, you are trying to discover yourself, but you can never really know your own true authentic self until, these layers of addiction peel off. And underneath all that is this beautiful authentic self that you have this
Right.
wonderful opportunity to get to know, but it's just buried by addiction. So I just wanted
Yeah.
to hear that. So
Yes.
another point is, unfortunately, people in recovery often struggle with low self-esteem and self-worth, leading them to make decisions that negatively impact them. So setting boundaries will help create a sense of identity and worth in a way you view yourself and your relationships with others. I have known so many people that struggle with addiction, and it's hard to climb out of that dark hole of poor decisions. And haven't you seen, Jamie, where poor decisions beget poor decisions, beget poor it's
Absolutely.
just totally
Yes,
one big spiral. Then guilt and shame
Mhm.
follow after that. It's a horrible, dark, vicious cycle. But on the other hand, we have seen people starting to make progress, especially in real food recovery. And
Oh
it's
yeah,
like this light washes over them, and you can just see the pride in their eyes. They are cheerful and almost glowing from the inside out. I literally have seen people literally like a light bulb has
I
turned
know.
on inside of them. It's so beautiful to
It
watch.
is beautiful.
So self-worth is something we addressed several podcasts ago, and it's such a critical component when it comes to sticking with recovery. By the way, I just want to say to everyone listening, I'm proud of you for even being here and listening in. It's like making deposits in advance in your recovery bank account. So good on you. Keep
Agreed.
listening. Keep joining us.
Agreed. Agreed. Yes. Yeah. This is not a topic that everyone's comfortable with. So it's great that you're even here learning
Yeah.
about it. Good job.
Mhm.
Something that was too important not to address are what unhealthy boundaries look like. So we
Mhm.
talked about maybe, the what of boundaries, the why of boundaries. Now we're going to talk about what unhealthy boundaries look like, especially in recovery. Please take note of these because we don't want to we don't claim to have the market cornered, and
Mhm.
love to have feedback on any of these if they sound familiar to you, or how examples of how you've handled them. And I think here it's important to Paige and I are going to be giving maybe some personal examples to
Mhm.
help illustrate these unhealthy examples of boundaries. Go ahead, Paige.
Yeah, beginning relationships without thinking how it may affect your recovery, most similar to the people around you. This isn't with food recovery, but I've heard in other realms, people like coming out of food or drug addiction, how they have to literally create all new uh, social circles, because if you get back into those social circles, usually those were the people doing the habits before this happened, so you have to create new ones with that. So that's a drug addiction. That's a pretty extreme example. But in food addiction, where food, we still have to eat to live, there are still some modifications that may be necessary in order to stay in recovery, to stay in healthy recovery. I remember there was a lady I knew in recovery. She was in her early 70s, 70, 71. She had been divorced several years, but starting to date. So she was excited, of course, to have a boyfriend after all this time post divorce. Well, so this started a whole new aspect of her life that she maybe hadn't thought completely through, because that meant dates, dinners, traveling. It's that new fluttery excitement. And for people new in recovery, that can be a real triggering danger zone. And
Oh
so
yes.
she realized on one of their first excursions that right from the get-go, her partner was doing things that were outside of her norm and her comfort zone, and she was being exposed on such a monumentally higher level that and I think she had a few little stumblings. So
Yeah,
she realized after one of these long weekends or something like that, that she said, I may need to break up with him. Or you can have a talk and say, we're going to need to modify this. And quite frankly, if you're in a long-term committed relationship with someone, they need to know up front
absolutely.
what your boundaries are. And
Absolutely.
and quite frankly, they, I'm sure, would, if they care about you, they want to make sure that you're safe and happy
Mhm.
in the relationship. So it's definitely worth talking about, definitely worth staying aware of, and making sure that this relationship is beneficial. A good deal in business, you hear this a lot, a good deal isn't a good deal unless it's equally good for everyone. It's the same way with relationships. We need to make sure that it's equally good, and
Yes,
we need to be in a place where we can connect with our partner and loved ones, and feel safe and comfortable.
agreed. Um, The second one would be ignoring personal beliefs or values to gain acceptance from others. This is an example of an unhealthy boundary. So this would be sort of related to the first one, in the sense of ignoring your personal beliefs and values might be something we do at the beginning of a relationship because we're maybe losing ourselves. It's not healthy, but it's very common. And I would say this example here for me, where I would ignore personal beliefs and values. I moved into a home with my husband who we were sharing, which we were sharing with his father. And I could have, right, he's my new father-in-law, and I wanted to make sure that we have a good relationship. I could have easily abandoned my own values to gain his acceptance and to keep peace in the home. But there were certain things that I was not willing to negotiate on. And some of them were around his TV use and the barrage of sports and commercials for fast food. The way the food was cooked in the home, what food was cooked in the home, how food was kept in the home, all of those things I really needed to make sure that I asserted my needs on. And I was very grateful that he totally understood once I explained to him that it was, like asking an alcoholic in recovery to live in a bar.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't do it. And he totally understood. And he made changes to the home. He made changes to the way he kept the home. He made changes to where he watched TV and how he watched TV from a headphone perspective, because it was just loud, blaring through the house all over. And it was just and he was very accommodating in letting me set up the kitchen and set up the pantry in a way that was very, very helpful to my addiction recovery. And I really am very grateful to him for doing that. And I am learning that if I hadn't listened to my personal values, listened to my beliefs, listened to what I knew would work for me, I would have had maybe his acceptance, but it would have been short-lived because I would be very resentful of how, not even at him, but at myself.
Oh, yeah.
For not speaking up for my own needs.
That's such a good point. And it's funny you said that, because that's what I was thinking about, how whenever we don't respect our own needs in the beginning. Well, first of all, do you think women are more people pleasers and
Yes.
just wanting to, yeah, I not to be,
Culturally,
but I think,
we're
and
taught to be.
yeah, and especially in relationships. So girls, listen up to this one, because this one's really important. But the irony is when we want to be people pleasers, we bend and sway and move and do everything to make sure everybody else is happy. But in the end, it just breeds resentment, and it
Exactly.
just moves into this ugly blow up that you were trying to avoid, ironically, from the beginning.
Yeah. It only
Dang it.
it only goes against us to make those choices.
So another one is accepting gifts, favors, and actions that don't support recovery. We just need to always be aware of those subtleties. Sometimes someone might invite you to something that sets you up to be wobbly. It's okay to decline offers in order to keep you safe. I know we're going to be traveling in a few months, and part of the activity, I hate to use that word, is the big going out to dinner. And we're going to be gone for several days. And I was telling my husband, you know what? I can't do the 3 meals out. I can do one. And you know what? I think I want to do the noon. I don't want to go out late because everybody in our group likes to go out late. And I'm willing to be the fuddy-duddy. I don't care if I'm a nerd. I own it. I'm going to get a t-shirt made and wear it that says I'm a nerd, and happy to be it. I want to go to bed on time. I don't want my stomach to kill me. I don't want more restaurant food. I don't need that much. I'm willing to go out to lunch and be a good sport. And I'm going to cut that lunch in half, and I'm going to eat the other half for dinner, because I already know what they're going to give me for lunch is way too much. But I don't want my stomach to hurt every day. And he said, okay. So he understands, but I just not do that night after night, going out too late. They go out, our family likes to go out to dinner when I'm trying to get ready for bed. I just can't function well, and my stomach kills me. Not worth it.
Yeah,
So I'm going to start making some new changes on this trip over the holidays, and we'll see
for
how
you.
it goes.
Good
Yeah.
for you. Good for you. Um, so what's next? Accepting gifts and favors? Is that the next one?
Uh, yours is next about
Oh,
accepting others.
all right. Expecting others to know what you need and want without expressing your needs and wants. So it's all related, right? So
Hmm.
if we don't know who we are, what we need, what we want, what will work for us, what won't work for us, we can't possibly express that to someone. And sometimes we do know what we need and what we want, and we expect others to read our minds. Also,
That works great.
dangerous. Yeah, also a dangerous proposition because it only breeds resentment. And by the way, nobody is a mind reader. Nobody.
Right.
I don't care how in love with your partner or spouse or loved one you are. Nobody is a mind reader. It's
Hmm.
just not possible.
Hmm.
So no matter how well they know you or profess their love for you, it's just not a skill set that somebody needs to have. And you know what? You don't want someone reading your mind because 99% of the time they'll be wrong. And even if they're not, even if they know you very well and you may be 70-30, why would you even chance it? Why would you even chance it? That's a D. I don't want a D. Right? So think about how if we have an expectation of any kind that someone will be, to know what we would want, what we need, that they would act on it without us saying anything. Any expectation like that is just a premeditated resentment. So be aware.
I've heard you talk to some of our members in Real Food Recovery about when they have been in a conversation with someone and it didn't go as they planned, and you are quick to go, you had expectations of what you wanted that other person,
Mhm.
how you expected them to respond, and then you got upset because they didn't meet what your expectations were, and they had no idea what these expectations were. So, great
Yeah.
point. I love
And
that.
it reminds us where our power is, right? That's why I say that to them, not to point a finger, but to say, you do have power here. You're not a victim. You had an expectation you didn't realize you had, and that's on you, right? And when now that you can say, oh, I had an expectation, I didn't even know I had that. Okay, now I can unravel why I had that expectation and what can I do differently to communicate my needs to someone and then have a different outcome.
It sets us up for pain, right?
If
Yep.
expectations, yes,
Yeah.
uncommunicated ones, especially.
Right. Right. It is a dismal failure every time that happens. So
Agreed.
I'm glad we talked about that a little bit more. So another thing is negative self-treatment, including thoughts, actions, and words. In our recovery group at Real Food Recovery, we put a huge emphasis on self-talk. You are your most important relationship that you are ever going to have. So be nice. Just be
Mhm.
nice. Your inner voice controls your outlook on life. It changes dark clouds into sunshine. It's that pivotal. And you can talk yourself into anything. Your mind only knows what you tell it.
Right.
So you could talk yourself into having a stomach ache, or you could talk yourself into being the happiest person in the world. But self-talk is just tremendously important in recovery, saying, I know I can do this. This is Other people have done it and it's going to get easier. Hang in there. I can join this recovery group or whatever, but there's always options. There's always silver linings. And if you will just speak to yourself in kindness, because we know that no one ever hated themselves into recovery,
That's right.
you are going to be exponentially further down the road than the next guy.
That's right. That's right. Um, the next one is either trusting everyone or trusting no one. So that's an example of a boundary gone, what is it? Boundary gone wild, right?
Boundary gone bad.
Boundary gone bad is exactly. So again, we don't want our boundaries to be so loose that we just let everyone have access to us and potentially, breach our trust. And we
Mhm.
don't want to have our boundaries be so stringent that we really don't let anyone get close to us.
Mhm.
That's an example. Both of those are examples of our boundaries harming us.
Mhm.
Again, our boundaries are not about the people. Our boundaries protect us from ourselves so that we can have meaningful relationships with others.
Yeah.
That's something. Trusting others is something that I've had to learn how to do. because of the way I grew up. Trust was not a hot commodity in my home, or in, for me. So I've had to learn a lot about how to trust and how to discern. You can't really have trust without discernment.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to learn how to discern my needs, and then if those people are going to fit with my needs, and then just giving it some mileage to see how it goes. And if it's consistently falling short, or my needs are falling short of their ability to meet them, and vice versa, then that just tells me that, hey, I tried it. It's not the best person to have close to me in my life, and it doesn't mean that I never can trust them, or that they're horrible people. It doesn't mean that at all. Just means that they don't get that close access to me.
So wise.
Yeah, they're, if it's a concentric set of concentric circles, like a bullseye, they're further out from the
Mm-hmm.
bullseye than others are. And sometimes people move. Sometimes people in my life, they move around on my bullseye, and I move around on their bullseye.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that I think they're horrible people, or they think I'm a horrible person. It just means that there are certain things, breaches of trust, or certain things that I can't allow to be close to me at that point. Certain behaviors of theirs that I really have to ask if they're close to me or not, or if they're allowed to be close to me or not. And if they're not, I keep them at arm's length. I have a couple family members on my side, and even family members in the other side of the family, that I keep at arm's length, because they
Mm-hmm.
have active addiction. They have other personality styles that just, I know, don't mesh with mine. And I'm a very sensitive person, so I tend to just keep them at arm's length. I love them from afar. I don't let them have close access to me, because they're not people that I need close around me.
That I love that so much, because when we're talking about boundaries, you and I have talked a lot about no one's coming to save you.
Mhm.
So boundaries, in essence, what I hear you talking about just now is it's a compass to keep us safe,
Mhm.
because nobody else is going to do that
No.
for you. So I love that, what you just
Yes.
talked about.
Yes. Have you ever fallen victim to any of these, either in your life or in others?
Well, probably much more so when I was younger and in love and
Mhm.
very immature. I had that propensity to bend to meet the needs of my partner, desperate for the relationship to work out. I mean, I was so young and dumb. I can't believe how I ever functioned in this world. But you, things were so much bigger and so much more dramatic. And what if your high school boyfriend stops loving you? I mean, the earth would spin off its axis, right? I mean, just that desperate level for things to work out in a dramatic way. But although I will say I'm proud of myself, and when I was around 19ish, I was getting ready to break up with this boyfriend. And so he was very smart. He went and bought me this really nice piece of jewelry, which I loved. I loved it so much, but I made it take him back and return it, because I didn't feel it was right taking it.
Mhm.
And I'm sure it was a way to manipulate me into staying
Mhm.
in the relationship. So I am proud of myself at that young, immature age, that I had enough foresight to know this was not a good idea, and it came with strings, and it would be used to
Exactly.
weaponize me later on. So that was kind of my first big step into big girl boundaries. And I'm like, oh, okay. I
Mhm.
it was a hollow victory, but yet I felt proud of myself.
Oh, no.
And
Yeah.
it's where that frontal lobe is starting to develop. To 10 steps down the road, you can see where this is not going to be a good idea. What about you?
Yes. So same situation. I had a boyfriend that I knew I was going to have to break up with, for lots of unsavory reasons that, were becoming more and more apparent. And he bought me a piece of jewelry, beautiful piece of jewelry.
Are
And
we
when I
dating the
did,
same guy?
yeah, and when I did break up with him, I made sure that I got that jewelry back to him. Um, and I made sure that he knew that the jewelry was given back to him, and that I got it in writing that it was given back. And because I
Wow.
didn't want to be on the hook for it, and I
Right.
knew it did not sit well with me to take something
Mhm.
like that, of any kind of value, any
Right.
kind of value from this person who truly was, trying to manipulate me with it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's so it's such a good learning. It's such a good skill to have, right? Being true to your values is also another example of a boundary. And that's
Yeah.
what I,
And oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, that's what I learned. I'm learning every day in recovery.
I just think this is such a smart conversation topic for, I don't know how many young girl listeners we have out there, but teaching our children about what they are and how important they are and why they're important and how boundaries affect us long term, because when we're young, that part of our brain is not fully developed yet. Gosh, I
Right.
think in women it's like 22, 23, and for men it's 26. So
Mhm.
especially when people are being exposed to so many things so young, and I just think it's a good conversation if you have families to have with your kids. And I hate to say especially girls, but I think I will say especially girls, to understand what boundaries are to keep themselves safe.
I agree. I agree. So we've got some great listener questions here, Paige. First one, how do I teach your children about boundaries? I was
Okay.
never taught as a child. So, Paige, this is something that you probably have a lot of experience with, right? You something it wasn't taught to you as a child. How did you instill this, or maybe help instill it in your kids as they were getting older?
That's a great question. I honestly, I did not realize this was our first listener question when I just was talking about that. I just was immersed in our thinking about our similar situations and dealing with big adult things at early age. But conversation, right? And explaining why and being a good example, but lots and lots of communication helps. And quite frankly, listening to podcasts like this and bringing up the topic and having conversations. So now I have grandchildren that we can start to talk to about that, even if it's as simple as we don't hit and we don't hit others and that type of thing, or we don't scream, or we have boundaries about our bodies and things like that. So lots of communication, listening to them, understanding what's happening in their lives, staying close
Mhm.
to them. And just if you're in a good connected space with your children or grandchildren, these conversations will naturally come up with the things they're struggling with.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it opens the door to expound on it a little more. Do you have anything else that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I know. I didn't know. I wasn't taught them, obviously, but with my nieces and nephews, I made sure that if they and many times, they trusted me enough to be able to just say whatever was on their mind, which was a total gift. And they would just tell me things that were either taught to them or told to them, or something that they were working on, or something that mommy and daddy had taught me, and they would share it with me, and I would, just make sure that I carried that message, right, and reinforced it with them. And just would laugh about how they would kind of open up to me, and I use that as an opportunity to just reinforce healthy boundaries.
Yeah, smart. And it starts from the earliest age with a hot stove or staying away
Yep.
from the stairs or electrical outlets like that, that those boundaries keep you safe. We want to
Exactly.
keep, even with my teenagers, of coming home early from um, parties and things like that, having a regular curfew. My mom used to say that nothing good happens after midnight.
Yeah, that's a saying in my family too.
So
Sometimes they say 10 p.m. I don't know about that, but
well, my kids thought I was very, very brutal because I would say whatever grade you're in, that was your curfew, like 10th grade,
makes
11th grade.
sense to me.
Yeah, it did not to them. So oftentimes they would come in, say, I'm home for the night, and then go downstairs and out their sister's window in the basement.
Oh,
So, and do the whole pillows in the bed with the sheets up over the bed. So
oh,
after my son did that, and somehow I figured out he had slipped out. And so I just went downstairs and I closed that when it was a crank window and
Yep.
then the lock, and then went up to the garage door and turned the electricity off to the
They couldn't
garage
get in.
door. Uh-huh. So about 3 o'clock, he had to call the house and say, I need to get in. Really? Where are you? I went to bed with a very nice smile on my face. And so we had a nice discussion about boundaries and rules and things like that the
Yeah.
next.
Yeah. Yeah. Did it change?
No, because shortly thereafter, when winter came, it had snowed and he swore he didn't sneak out, but the dummy didn't think about footprints from his sister's bedroom all the way to his car.
That's
And then,
hilarious.
there's tire tracks, and
That's
then the
hilarious.
footsteps start from the car back in.
Right.
So, and he was denying. I took his boot at the time and
Yeah.
just put it into the front footprint.
Right.
I, you just have to stay one step ahead of the kids.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's all the job is as a parent, is being smarter than your child, and they will make it hard. It's not
Yeah.
easy to stay
Yeah.
one step ahead. So lots of conversations. So don't give up. Keep
Yeah.
talking.
Well, that's it. I think that God designed their brains to mature at a slower pace so that we can stay one step ahead.
Yes. Thank
That's
you,
what
Lord.
I believe.
Thank
That's what
you,
I
Lord.
believe. Second question. My mom always likes to make my favorite birthday dessert, even though I have told her I don't eat that anymore. And it makes me feel so guilty that I'm letting her down. What should I do? I think that this is something, it's a beautiful example of how to set a boundary for yourself, to
Mhm.
keep yourself safe from you.
Mhm.
And it's a, I would say, a skill we learn in recovery. I don't think anyone I know likes to learn it because it's about having difficult conversations,
Mhm.
but there's other ways around it. We can't change another person. So us expressing our boundaries might not change their behavior. So we have to say, okay, sometimes you'll have food pushers. Sometimes they look like mom or grandma or aunts or uncles, but they will be food pushers. Sometimes they'll look like a best friend.
Yeah.
And you have to get really skilled at being able to pick your battles
Yeah.
and say, thank you, no, thank you. And if they're still not listening, like I used to have, family members give us stuff to take home. And when I was first in recovery, I knew I couldn't have it in the house.
Right.
I didn't know the science behind it. I didn't know why, but I just knew I couldn't have it because I was
Interesting.
going to get into it. So I would take the food from them and I would stop at the first gas station and throw it away.
Yeah.
So it's, again, some people might be horrified in hearing that and thinking that it's a waste of food.
Oh
It's a
no.
waste of food if I'm eating something that's only going to make me sick. Then it's a real waste of food.
And
I've also given it to, if I see someone on the side of the street
yeah.
who doesn't have a meal
Right.
or a home, giving it to them.
Yeah. Happy birthday. Here you go.
Mhm.
Don't you
Especially
think?
on holidays.
Yeah. Don't you think food pushers really are, they're just trying to make themselves feel
Yes.
comfortable,
Yes.
of I need you to eat this too so I can feel good about myself.
Yes. That's exactly what it is.
And if you're denying it, then you're going to make me feel uncomfortable, like I have to step up to the plate and do a little better.
That's exactly what it
And
is.
I don't want
Their
to.
own insecurity that's showing
Yeah.
up. Nothing
I
to do
need
with ours.
I need you to do this with me so I can feel not guilty.
But if we're agreeable, we'll go along to get along. But it's to those folks that are highly disagreeable, that don't care. Not that they don't care what other people's feelings or hurt. They care, but they're not willing to sacrifice their own needs
Yeah.
to make someone else feel better. So you
Yeah.
can say no in a loving and kind way and keep your boundary. It takes some skills, but it's totally doable.
Yeah. And you have to be willing to accept whatever their reaction is, because it may
Right.
not be great.
That's right.
It may not be great. And then what do you do? And that's where people just are they don't want the conflict. But I love your answer.
There's ways
And,
out. There's ways out. You can always
and,
use the old doctor excuse. My doctor doesn't want me to eat that anymore.
mhm. Or I'm so full right now, let me take a piece home. And then, like you said,
Yeah. If you have that strength to do that, to stop at that gas station and throw it away.
mhm. I I love what you said about, I didn't know the science behind why. I just knew I couldn't have it in the house. I was thinking about that the other day when I was a mother and cutting the crust off sandwiches. I would go to the sink to throw it away, and then all of a sudden it'd be in my mouth. And I'm like, why did I even do that? Or
Mhm.
their leftovers on their plate, I would just finish it because I didn't want to throw the food away. Why am I doing that? So
Yeah.
it helps to know the science behind. But yeah.
Yes.
And the other thing you can do is offer tolerable dessert. I'm doing dessert in air quotes for those that can't see me, dessert options with fruit. They are doing fun, cute, darling
Yes.
cakes made out of watermelons and different grapes and things like that that decorate. Say, I want to bring the dessert. I'm going to show you something that I've
Mhm.
just discovered that is going to knock everybody's socks off.
Yeah,
So
my husband made that for me for our wedding day. He made a watermelon cake.
get out of here.
Mhm.
What else?
Beautiful. We had a traditional cake, and we also had the watermelon cake with blueberries and grapes and cascading down the side. Yeah, he
Gosh, I
he
want to see
was.
a picture of that.
Mhm.
We need
Yeah,
to put it up on our Facebook page. Honestly, that would be so cool. I really seriously, I want to see a picture of that.
yeah. I'm sure I have it. I'm sure I have it because it was a big hit, and everyone laughed and they're like, "Oh, that's Jamie's cake." And I'm like, "That's right."
Yeah, everybody elbows out. Get away.
Mhm. Yep, that's right.
Oh, and if you guys have ideas of how you handle food pushers, make sure to leave it in the comments and share with us. We'd love to hear what
Yes,
you do. Great
yes, and
episode.
yes, definitely. And we'll be back for part 2 of boundaries. Part 2, what's healthy, what's not.
Yeah,
So we'll talk about more of the examples of boundaries, and give you lots of tools to work with.
perfect. I love it. Good
Thank
stuff.
you.
All right. Visit us at realfoodrecovery4u.com if you want to know more or find out about our online food addiction recovery community. That's the number 4, the letter U, realfoodrecovery4u.com. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.